Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a season in a woman's life when the silence grows louder than the noise she used to tolerate. The phone stops ringing. The room feels emptier, familiar faces fade into distance, and she asks herself, God, why did you let them leave? God never subtracts without purpose. When he removes people from a woman's life, it is not because she is losing value. It is because her value is increasing. People who can celebrate you when you are surviving, but cannot stand you when you start becoming. They were comfortable with your brokenness, but threatened by your healing. Some people were assigned to a season, not a lifetime. They were present for your pain. They were never equipped for your promise. And when God prepares to elevate a woman, he first clears the room, because the next level requires a different atmosphere. You see, God will remove those who only knew the old version of you because they keep expecting you to bleed where you've already been healed. They keep pulling you back into conversations you've outgrown, habits you've buried, and identities you've outlived. And God says, I can't take you forward while they keep dragging you backward. Sometimes God removes people not because they are evil, but because they are expired. They served their purpose. They taught you what you needed to know. They revealed what you needed to see. And now their assignment is complete. A woman in transition cannot carry unnecessary weight. Some relationships feel heavy because they were never meant to go this far. And God, in his mercy, steps in and does what your heart was too tender to do. He lets them go. Do not confuse loneliness with loss. Sometimes God isolates a woman so he can speak to her without interruption. He pulls her away from the crowd so she can hear her own voice again. Because before he sends her into purpose, he must first reintroduce her to herself. Because attachment always leaves fingerprints on the soul. But just because it hurt doesn't mean it harmed you. Some exits are painful because they are necessary surgeries, not fatal wounds. God removes manipulators before they destroy your discernment. He removes users before they drain your strength. He removes distractions before they delay your destiny. And he removes counterfeits before the real thing arrives. If they walked away when you started standing up, let them go. If they left when you stopped shrinking, let them go. If they disappeared when you started choosing peace, let them go. Trust the God who sees what you cannot see. Trust the hand that closes doors as faithfully as it opens them. And trust that every removal is making room for alignment, clarity, strength, and purpose. Divine removal is not rejection, it is protection. That truth is difficult to accept when a woman is standing in the aftermath of loss, confusion, sudden distance. When people leave without explanation, when relationships dissolve without closure, support systems disappear at the very moment they seem most needed, the heart naturally interprets it as rejection. It feels personal. Feels like abandonment. It feels like being deemed unworthy of staying connected. But divine removal operates on a higher logic than human emotion. What feels like loss on the surface is often safety in disguise. There are moments when God sees what a woman cannot yet see. He recognizes dangers hidden behind smiles, intentions masked by affection, and motives buried beneath familiarity. Because of closeness, she may overlook red flags. Because of love, she may rationalize disrespect. Because of history, she may tolerate what is quietly eroding her spirit. Divine protection does not always come as comfort. Sometimes it comes as separation. And separation, while painful, often the very thing that preserves a woman's future. Protection guards destiny. When God removes people from a woman's life, it is rarely about her lack. It is about her future. There are connections that cannot go where she is being taken. There are relationships that would sabotage her growth if allowed to remain. God does not remove to punish, he removes to preserve. He intervenes before damage becomes permanent, before compromise becomes character, before exhaustion becomes emptiness. A woman in transition is especially vulnerable. Growth makes her visible, and visibility attracts both genuine support and hidden opposition. Everyone who walks beside her wants her to arrive whole. Some benefit from her remaining small, uncertain, or dependent. Some are threatened by her clarity, her confidence, or her calling. Divine removal interrupts unhealthy access. It closes doors that people misuse. It creates boundaries that a woman may have struggled to enforce on her own. What feels like rejection is often God stepping in where her heart hesitated. Many women stay in environments that slowly diminish them because they confuse loyalty with sacrifice. They believe endurance is proof of love. They think staying, even when wounded, is strength. But divine protection does not glorify suffering for the sake of attachment. God values wholeness more than familiarity. He will remove a woman from situations that demand she betray herself just to be accepted. Protection is quiet but intentional. It does not argue. It does not explain itself in advance. It simply moves. People drift. Conversations stop. Opportunities close, and in the stillness that follows, confusion arises. But with time, clarity begins to unfold. What once felt unbearable starts to feel necessary. The woman begins to see how much she was carrying, how much she was enduring, how much she was giving without receiving in return. She realizes that the removal saved her from deeper wounds she never had to experience. Divine removal also protects a woman's identity. There are relationships that constantly remind her of who she used to be rather than honoring who she is becoming. They hold her hostage to old versions of herself, expecting her to perform outdated roles. God removes those influences because growth requires space. Woman cannot evolve while being constantly pulled back into past expectations. Protection creates room for transformation. Sometimes the removal is not about danger, but about distraction. There are people who are not malicious, but misaligned. Their presence consumes emotional energy, time, and focus that should be invested elsewhere. God protects a woman by narrowing her circle so she can hear his voice clearly. Noise is not always harmful. It can delay direction. Silence, though uncomfortable, often brings alignment. Divine protection also shields a woman from becoming someone she is not. Staying in the wrong environment too long can harden the heart, distort perception, and compromise values. God removes influences that would pressure her to shrink her integrity or silence her truth. He protects her softness, her faith, her compassion, and her purpose. He refuses to let her survival cost her soul. What makes divine removal difficult is timing. It often happens before the woman is emotionally ready to let go. She may still see potential where God sees finality. She may still hope for change where God has already closed the chapter. Protection is not based on emotional readiness, it is based on divine foresight. God acts early so that healing does not have to be harder later. In time, woman realizes that what left her life did not take peace with it. Instead, peace slowly returns. Her breathing becomes easier. Her thoughts grow clearer. Her spirit feels lighter. These are signs that what she experienced was not rejection, but rescue. God did not remove support, he removed strain. He did not take love away, he removed imbalance. He did not abandon her, he defended her. Divine removal teaches a woman to trust God's hand even when she does not understand his methods. It builds discernment, it strengthens boundaries, it deepens faith, and most importantly, it positions her for healthier connections ahead. Protection makes room for people who can honor her growth, support her purpose, and walk with her in truth. Rejection leaves a woman questioning her worth. Protection restores her value. And when she looks back with healed eyes, she sees that what felt like loss was actually mercy. God removed what could not go forward so she could. He closed doors so she would not settle. He protected her future by disrupting her present. Divine removal is not rejection. It is love expressed through wisdom. It is God standing between a woman and what would have broken her, delayed her, or diminished her. And though it may hurt in the moment, always proves faithful in the end. Some people are seasonal, not permanent. This truth is simple in words, but profound in impact, especially in the life of a woman who values connection, loyalty, and emotional depth. Seasons are a natural part of life. The earth moves through them without apology. Spring gives way to summer, summer yields to autumn, and autumn surrenders to winter. None of these seasons are failures. Each one serves a purpose. In the same way, people enter our lives for specific seasons, not to stay forever, to contribute something necessary for a particular moment in our journey. The difficulty lies in our expectations. We often assume that everyone who starts the journey with us is meant to finish it with us. We build emotional permanence around temporary assignments, confuse meaningful impact with lifelong presence. When those people leave, we feel betrayed, confused, or abandoned. But departure does not always mean deception. Sometimes it simply means completion. Seasonal people arrive when we need a certain lesson, support, or reflection. They may walk with us through pain, transition, or uncertainty. They may help us survive a difficult chapter, remind us of our strength, or expose wounds that need healing. Their presence is significant, but significance does not automatically equal permanence. A bridge is essential to cross a river, but it is not meant to be carried once the crossing is complete. When a season changes, clinging to what belongs to the previous one can create unnecessary suffering. Growth requires release. If a woman insists on keeping people beyond their season, she may delay her own progress. Relationships that once nurtured her can become restrictive when their purpose has expired. What once felt supportive can begin to feel heavy. That heaviness is often a signal that the season is shifted. Seasonal people are not mistakes. They are not accidents. They are part of the design. Each season of life demands different qualities from the people around us. In seasons of building, we need encouragers and teachers. In seasons of healing, we need compassion and patience. In seasons of expansion, we need accountability and alignment. Everyone is equipped for every phase. Some people are perfectly suited for who we were, but not for who we are becoming. One of the hardest lessons is learning not to take seasonal endings personally. When people leave, it is easy to internalize their absence as a reflection of our worth. But seasons end regardless of effort or intention. Winter does not come because autumn failed. It comes because it is time. In the same way, people exit not always because something went wrong, because something is changing. Holding on to seasonal people out of fear can stunt emotional maturity. It can lead to compromise, resentment, or self-betrayal. A woman may silence her growth to preserve familiarity. She may dim her progress to keep others comfortable. No one should have to shrink to maintain connection. The right people will adjust to growth, not resist it. Seasonal people often struggle when transformation begins because their role was tied to a former version of you. There is also grief in seasonal endings. Even when the departure is necessary, it still hurts. Shared memories do not disappear just because a season ends. Gratitude and sadness can coexist. A woman can honor what was without forcing it to remain. Closure does not always come through conversation. Sometimes it comes through acceptance. Understanding that a season has ended allows the heart to rest. Seasonal relationships teach discernment. Over time, a woman learns to recognize patterns: who shows up during difficulty, who disappears during growth, who supports from a distance, and who walks away when expectations shift. This awareness is not meant to harden her heart, but to sharpen her wisdom. Discernment allows her to appreciate people for who they are without demanding what they cannot give. Not everyone who leaves does so with malice. Some leave because they have reached the end of their capacity. Some leave because the connection no longer aligns with their path. Some leave because their own season is changing. Understanding this prevents bitterness. Bitterness traps the heart in a past season. Understanding allows forward movement. Seasonal people also prepare us for permanent ones. They teach us what we value, what we tolerate, and what we need. Through them, we learn boundaries, communication, and self-respect. Each season refines us, shaping us for deeper, healthier connections ahead. Without those lessons, permanence would be mismanaged. A woman who understands seasons no longer begs people to stay. She no longer chases what is leaving. She trusts timing more than attachment. She learns to release with grace, knowing that what is meant to remain will not require force. Peace replaces panic when she realizes that endings are not failures, but transitions. Some people are meant to plant seeds, not harvest fruit. Some are meant to walk beside you in the valley, not stand with you on the mountain. And that is not an insult, it is order. When a woman honors seasons, she honors herself. She stops measuring love by longevity alone and starts measuring it by impact. In time, she looks back and sees how each seasonal relationship played a role. She recognizes the wisdom in what left and the mercy in what remained. She understands that permanence is rare and precious, and that not everyone is meant to carry the weight of her future. Some people are seasonal, not permanent. Accepting this truth frees a woman from unnecessary guilt, fear, and resistance. It allows her to grow without apology, love without possession, and release without bitterness. And in that freedom, she finds peace, not because everyone stayed, but because she finally understood why they didn't. God removes those who cannot handle your growth. This truth often reveals itself quietly, without warning. Usually at a moment when a woman is finally beginning to step into clarity, confidence, and purpose. Growth changes posture. It changes voice. It changes boundaries. And not everyone who was comfortable with your silence will celebrate your strength. When transformation begins, it exposes the capacity of the people around you. Some adjust, some applaud, and some resist. It is in that resistance that divine removal begins. Growth disrupts familiarity. People who knew the old version of you may struggle to relate to who you are becoming. They were comfortable when you were unsure, accommodating, or constantly available. But when you start choosing yourself, honoring your values, and protecting your peace, the dynamic shifts. The relationship can no longer operate the way it once did. What once felt effortless now feels tense. And rather than evolve, some people reveal that they were only comfortable with your limitations, not your expansion. God removes those people not as a punishment, but as a safeguard. Growth requires space, and resistance creates friction. A woman cannot fully mature while constantly defending her progress to those who feel threatened by it. Some people benefit from your stagnation because it keeps the power dynamic in their favor. Your growth challenges their sense of control, relevance, superiority. When they cannot adjust, God intervenes to protect the work He is doing within you. Everyone who walks with you is equipped to walk ahead of you. Growth often creates distance, not because you changed your heart, because you changed your direction. Some people were aligned with your survival, not your success. They supported you when you were struggling because it allowed them to feel needed. But when you become self-assured, healed, or purposeful, their role feels diminished. Rather than celebrate your progress, they mourn the version of you they could manage. God sees this before you do. He recognizes when a relationship is becoming a barrier instead of a blessing. He notices when conversations start draining rather than nourishing you. He observes when encouragement turns into subtle discouragement, when support becomes sarcasm, and when concern masks insecurity. Rather than allowing that influence to stunt your growth, He removes it. This removal can be painful because it often involves people you trusted. You may wonder why your evolution caused distance instead of deeper connection. But growth always reveals truth. It exposes who was attached to your essence and who was attached to your availability. Those who cannot handle your growth often attempt to keep you anchored to your past, reminding you of mistakes you have already outgrown or expectations you no longer accept. God removes them because growth is sacred. What He is building in you requires protection. Just as a seed must be covered to grow, your transformation needs an environment that supports development. Constant criticism, comparison, or resistance can damage what is still forming. Divine removal shields your progress until it is strong enough to stand on its own. There is also a humbling aspect to growth that some people misinterpret as arrogance. When you begin to walk in confidence, those who benefited from your insecurity may label your boundaries as pride. But maturity often looks like distance to those who relied on your overextension. God removes these voices so you are not confused about who you are becoming. It is important to understand that removal does not always come with confrontation. Sometimes people simply drift. Communication fades. Opportunities to connect diminish. At first, it feels like loss, but over time, peace settles in. You realize how much emotional energy you are spending trying to explain your growth, justify your healing, or minimize your progress to keep others comfortable. The absence becomes relief. Growth also requires accountability, and not everyone wants to rise to that standard. When you start making healthier choices, some people feel exposed. Your discipline highlights their complacency. Your healing reflects their unaddressed wounds. Instead of facing themselves, they withdraw or criticize. God removes them so their discomfort does not become your distraction. A woman who is growing will inevitably outgrow some relationships. This is not a sign of disloyalty. It is a sign of alignment. Loyalty that demands stagnation is not loyalty. It is limitation. God honors growth because it leads to purpose. He removes those who would delay that journey. In time, you begin to see the wisdom in the separation. You recognize how much freer you are to think, create, and evolve. You stop apologizing for your progress. You no longer explain your transformation to people who refuse to understand it. You trust that those meant to walk with you in this season will have the capacity to celebrate your growth, not compete with it. God removes those who cannot handle your growth because He values what you are becoming. He refuses to let insecurity, resistance, misunderstanding sabotage your destiny. What feels like loss is actually alignment. What feels like distance is actually protection. What feels like loneliness is often the quiet space where growth becomes permanent. Healing often requires separation. This truth is difficult to accept because healing is usually imagined as restoration within familiar spaces, not distance from them. Many people hope to heal while remaining in the same environments, surrounded by the same voices, and connected to the same relationships that contributed to their wounds. But true healing demands honesty. Honesty often reveals that some proximity must be broken before wholeness can be restored. Separation is not always a sign of bitterness or rejection. Often, it is a sign of wisdom. When a woman begins the journey of healing, she becomes more aware of what hurts her spirit. She notices patterns she once ignored, behaviors she once excused, and dynamics she once normalized. What she tolerated before now feels heavy. What she once called love now feels like depletion. Healing sharpens awareness, and with awareness comes the need for change. Remaining in spaces that reopen wounds slows the healing process and confuses the heart. Separation creates room for clarity. When a woman steps away from constant interaction, she can finally hear her own thoughts without interference. She can distinguish between what she truly feels and what she has been conditioned to accept. Distance removes emotional noise. It allows reflection without pressure. It provides the quiet necessary for self-examination. Without separation, healing becomes reactionary instead of intentional. Many wounds are relational, and it is impossible to heal from harm while staying intimately connected to the source of that harm. Even when the pain was unintentional, proximity can trigger memories, habits, and emotional responses that keep wounds open. Separation does not always mean permanent removal. Sometimes it is temporary space designed to allow the heart to breathe. Healing needs oxygen, and separation provides it. There is often guilt attached to choosing distance, especially for women who are taught to prioritize others over themselves. They are encouraged to endure, to forgive quickly, to stay connected even when hurting. But healing requires boundaries. Boundaries are not walls built to punish others. They are safeguards built to protect the self. Separation is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. Healing also requires redefining identity. When a woman is constantly surrounded by people who only recognize her pain, her mistakes, or her past, it becomes difficult to embrace who she is becoming. Separation allows her to step out of old labels. It gives her space to grow without being reduced to former versions of herself. Healing flourishes when a woman is not constantly reminded of who she used to be. There are seasons when God calls a woman into solitude, not to isolate her from love, but to restore her capacity to receive it. Solitude reveals patterns of overgiving, people-pleasing, and self-neglect. It exposes attachments that were rooted in fear rather than connection. In separation, she learns to sit with herself, to confront unhealed wounds, to rediscover her worth without external validation. Healing often feels lonely because separation removes distractions, strips away the comfort of familiarity. But loneliness and aloneness are not the same. Aloneness can be nurturing. It allows a woman to grieve without performance, to rest without explanation, and to rebuild without pressure. In that space, she learns that her value does not depend on constant availability or approval. Separation also prevents re-injury. Without space, women may repeatedly reopen wounds through the same conversations, arguments, or emotional cycles. Healing cannot progress when the injury keeps recurring. Distance breaks the cycle. It interrupts unhealthy patterns and allows the nervous system to settle. Only then can true restoration begin. It is important to understand that separation does not erase love. Love can exist without access. Caring does not require constant contact, requires discernment, the wisdom to know when presence harms more than it helps. Some connections must be paused so healing can be completed. Woman begins to feel stronger, clearer, and more grounded. She notices that her emotions are less reactive. Her decisions become more intentional. Her sense of self stabilizes. These are signs that healing is taking root. She realizes that the distance was not meant to isolate her forever, to restore her fully. When healing is complete, reconnection, it happens, occurs from a place of strength rather than need. And if reconnection does not happen, she understands why. Separation taught her what peace feels like, showed her the difference between attachment and alignment. It gave her the courage to choose health over familiarity. Healing often requires separation because wholeness cannot grow in environments that keep reopening wounds. Distance creates the space necessary for truth, clarity, and restoration. Though it may feel uncomfortable at first, separation is often the doorway through which lasting healing enters. Expired relationships feel heavy because their assignment is complete. What once flowed with ease now feels strained. Conversations that once brought comfort now require effort. Presence that once energized now exhausts. This heaviness is not imaginary, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is often a signal that a relationship has fulfilled its purpose and is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. When an assignment is complete, continuation creates weight. Every meaningful relationship carries an assignment. Some are meant to teach, some to support, some to challenge, and some to walk with us through specific seasons. When that purpose is fulfilled, the relationship does not always end abruptly. Instead, it changes texture. It becomes harder to sustain. What once felt natural begins to feel forced. That discomfort is not betrayal, it is transition. Heaviness appears when growth outpaces alignment. As a woman evolves, her values, boundaries, and needs change. If a relationship does not evolve with her, the emotional connection begins to strain. She may find herself explaining more, compromising more, and tolerating more than she once did. The effort required to maintain the connection increases while the nourishment decreases. This imbalance creates fatigue. Expired relationships feel heavy because they demand energy without replenishment. A woman may leave interactions feeling drained rather than strengthened. She may notice that she is carrying the emotional weight of the relationship alone. What once was mutual now feels one-sided. This is often the clearest sign that the assignment has ended. Relationships are meant to be life-giving, not life-consuming. There is also resistance in expired relationships. When one person grows and the other remains attached to an earlier version, tension arises. The relationship begins to pull backward while life is moving forward. This resistance creates internal conflict. The woman feels torn between honoring who she was and embracing who she is becoming. The heaviness comes from living in contradiction. Expired relationships also carry unspoken expectations. People may expect access, behavior, or emotional availability that no longer aligns with your healing or growth. Meeting those expectations requires self-betrayal. Each time a woman compromises her truth to maintain an expired connection, the weight increases. The heaviness is the cost of ignoring inner clarity. Letting go is difficult because history carries emotional weight of its own. Shared memories, struggles, and milestones create attachment. But history alone does not justify permanence. A relationship can be meaningful and still be complete. Completion does not erase significance. It simply acknowledges timing. Many women stay in expired relationships out of loyalty or fear. Loyalty to people who were present during difficult seasons. Fear of being misunderstood, judged, or alone. But loyalty that requires stagnation is no longer loyalty. It is captivity. Fear that keeps a woman tethered to heaviness prevents her from stepping into freedom. Expired relationships often require constant justification. Woman may find herself explaining why she feels tired, why she needs space, or why things no longer feel the same. Instead of being met with understanding, she may encounter guilt, resistance, or dismissal. This emotional labor adds to the heaviness. When an assignment is complete, forcing continuation delays growth. It keeps both parties in a space that no longer serves either of them. Release is not abandonment, it is acknowledgement. It honors what was without demanding what cannot be sustained. Heaviness lifts when alignment returns. When a woman allows expired relationships to end Whether through distance, boundaries, or closure, she often experiences relief. The absence of constant strain restores emotional energy. Peace replaces tension. This relief confirms that the weight was not grief alone, but imbalance. Understanding completion allows release without bitterness. A woman can appreciate what a relationship gave her without resenting what it cannot give anymore. Gratitude and closure coexist. She learns that not every ending needs conflict. Some endings simply need acceptance. Expired relationships feel heavy because their assignment is complete, and continuing them beyond that point requires effort that drains the spirit. Recognizing this truth allows a woman to trust her discernment. It gives her permission to let go without guilt. And in that release, she creates space for relationships that align with who she is now, not who she used to be. Isolation is sometimes God's way of restoring clarity. While isolation is often feared and misunderstood, it is not always a punishment or a sign of abandonment. In many seasons, it is a deliberate, sacred process designed to quiet the noise, remove distractions, and realign the heart. When life becomes crowded with opinions, expectations, emotional demands, clarity is easily lost. God, in His wisdom, sometimes steps in and removes a woman from the crowd, not to harm her, to help her hear again. Clarity cannot exist in constant noise. When a woman is surrounded by too many voices, she begins to confuse external opinions with her own inner truth. She may doubt her discernment, second-guess her decisions, or lose confidence in what she once knew to be right. Isolation interrupts that cycle. It creates stillness. In the quiet, confusion settles, understanding begins to rise. Isolation often follows seasons of emotional exhaustion. A woman who has poured herself out for others, who has carried responsibilities without rest, or who has lived in survival mode for too long eventually reaches a point where clarity fades. She feels overwhelmed, scattered, and unsure. God uses isolation to restore her focus. By pulling her away from constant demands, He allows her to replenish what has been depleted. This separation is not about loneliness, it is about recalibration. God isolates a woman so she can reconnect with herself and with Him. Away from the influence of others, she can examine her thoughts without interference. She can pray without distraction. She can confront truth she avoided when surrounded by activity. Isolation becomes a mirror, reflecting both strength and areas that need healing. Many women fear isolation because it feels like rejection. Invitations stop coming or relationships shift. The heart naturally wonders what went wrong. But isolation is often a sign that God is doing a deeper work. He removes a woman from familiar patterns so she can break cycles that no longer serve her. Growth requires intentional pause, and isolation provides it. In isolation, clarity emerges through honesty. Without an audience, a woman no longer performs or pretends. She does not have to maintain roles or meet expectations. She can be vulnerable without judgment. This honesty allows her to identify what she truly wants, what she truly needs, and what she can no longer tolerate. Isolation strips away false clarity that was shaped by pleasing others. Isolation also sharpens discernment. When distractions are removed, patterns become visible. A woman begins to recognize why certain relationships drained her, why certain decisions left her uneasy, and why certain paths led to exhaustion rather than peace. What once felt confusing becomes clear when viewed from a distance. God uses isolation to realign her intuition. There is healing in isolation. Emotional wounds often remain unaddressed when life is busy. Pain gets buried under responsibility. Isolation slows the pace enough for healing to surface. It gives space to grieve, to forgive, and to release. Clarity comes when pain is acknowledged instead of suppressed. Isolation is also preparation. Before God elevates a woman, He often separates her from what she has outgrown. Clarity is essential for purpose, and purpose requires focus. In isolation, she gains understanding about her direction, her boundaries, and her calling. She learns to distinguish between opportunity and assignment, between noise and instruction. Though isolation can feel uncomfortable, it is rarely permanent. It is a season, not a destination. Its purpose is restoration, not removal from life. When clarity is restored, connection returns, often in healthier, more aligned forms. The woman re-enters community with stronger boundaries, deeper wisdom, and clearer vision. Isolation teaches a woman to trust God's presence even when human presence is limited. It strengthens her faith and independence. She learns that clarity does not come from consensus but from alignment. She discovers that silence can be sacred. Isolation is sometimes God's way of restoring clarity because clarity requires space to form. In the quiet, the fog lifts, the heart steadies, the mind refocuses. And when the season ends, the woman emerges not confused or broken, but grounded, aware, and ready for what comes next. Removes distractions before releasing destiny. This principle often unfolds quietly without dramatic announcements or clear explanations. May simply notice that certain interests fade, certain relationships lose momentum, or certain opportunities no longer excite her the way they once did. What feels like loss or confusion is often divine preparation. Destiny requires focus, and focus cannot thrive in a cluttered life. Before God entrusts greater purpose, He clears what competes with it. Distractions are not always bad things. In fact, many distractions appear harmless, productive, or even beneficial. They may be routines, relationships, habits, or ambitions that once served a purpose. But when destiny approaches, even good things can become obstacles if they divert energy, attention, or obedience. God removes distractions not because they are evil, but because they are misaligned with what is next. A distracted mind struggles to hear instruction. When life is filled with constant noise, it becomes difficult to discern direction. God removes distractions to create stillness. In stillness, clarity forms. A woman begins to recognize what truly matters and what has been consuming her without producing growth. The removal may feel uncomfortable because it disrupts familiarity, but it also restores vision. Destiny carries responsibility. It requires maturity, discipline, intentionality. Distractions keep a woman busy but unfulfilled. They occupy time without building purpose. God, in His wisdom, strips away what keeps her occupied with lesser things so she can prepare for greater ones. This pruning process is not easy. Letting go of what is familiar often feels like sacrifice, but sacrifice clears the way for alignment. Many distractions are emotional. Relationships that drain energy, environments that breed comparison, and conversations that foster doubt can quietly derail destiny. God removes these influences to protect a woman's mindset. Destiny requires confidence and faith. Persistent negativity, insecurity, or emotional chaos can weaken resolve. Removal restores emotional stability. Distractions also distort priorities. A woman may invest heavily in areas that provide immediate gratification while neglecting long-term purpose. God intervenes by closing doors, ending seasons, creating distance. These interruptions force reflection. They invite evaluation. What once felt urgent suddenly feels irrelevant. What once felt important loses its hold. Through this process, priorities realign. God removes distractions because destiny demands obedience. Obedience requires attentiveness. A distracted heart hesitates, delays, or negotiates instructions. God simplifies a woman's life so her yes can be clear and her actions decisive. Simplification is not loss, it is refinement.